Altså, det har på mange måter hatt samme type funksjon som band som The Beatles.
Den här scenen och den här typ världen har aldrig sett likadan ut utan.
Det är väl en av anledningarna till att vi är här.
Black metal wouldn't be what it is without Bathory.
I'm asked on many the occasion just who is Razorfist's favorite band, as bitch-titty buffoons beyond counting speculate I'm, quote, that hair metal guy. L to the O to the fucking L, my friends. My favorite band is and always has been Bathory. Full fucking stop. Look, did they create black metal? As I've established on many of the occasion, fuck to the no, they didn't. From guttural vocals to tremolo guitar picking to blast beats, Venom touched all those goddamn bases before Bathory were a butt fucking thought. Both musically and in terms of nomenclature, I'm afraid Venom lay claim to that particular honor, and that's a matter of public fucking record. But I'll tell you what they did do. Bathory took black metal from an amorphous catch-all used to describe any number of wildly divergent styles unified only in subject matter, and turned it into a bona fide movement, one that largely adheres to the tenets established on the first 4 Bathory albums to this day, and which rarely if ever attains the titanic, peerless quality of any of the above, to Quorthon's everlasting credit. Possibly Bathory's most enduring contribution, apart from the obvious musical ones, is the thick as fuck fog surrounding any and all details of the band or its members. I mean, think about it. Thanks to VH1, YouTube podcasts, and social media jamming a stethoscope up our collective assholes, we know what brand of black tar bullshit serum Dave Mustaine was slamming into his ginger jackass veins when he wrote Peace Sells. Yet Quorthon's been dead since 2004, and we still don't know the beginnings of a goddamn thing about himself or his band. Fuck, we don't even know why he passed of a heart attack in 2004, or what the mysterious allusions to previous heart trouble allude to in actuality. Fuck, we didn't even have firm fucking confirmation that Boss was in fact Quorthon's father until after they both bit the big one. Barons of black metal, the Viscounts of Viking metal, why there's even a little shitty thrash thrown in there. Come one, come all, and pay homage to the greatest black metal monstrosity ever erected, the greatest band ever formed, Bathory.
We had to do 2 tracks for a compilation of the Scandinavian Metal Attack 1, and that was in January 1984 with his first lineup. And from that we received so much fanmail.
It was me and 2 other guys. We got together in March of 1983, and the reason why the whole thing kept on going at all was because they had a rehearsal place for free and a lot of equipment. And we did the Scandinavian Metal Attack thing with Boss at Typhoon Records, and if it wouldn't have been for him, the thing would have been keeping on going.
And then you have a record like the first album. That album has been out for 20 years, so of course that record has amassed an enormous sales figure, but not because it's the world's best album, not because it's the longest album, it's only 26 minutes, but it's the Bathory debut album, and everybody sort of like needs to have it because it's Bathory's debut, and for historical reasons people are still continuing to buy that record, and we sell something between 2,000 and 4,000 every month, and it's insane.
What Sabbath was to creating metal, Judas Priest was to perfecting it. And so after an onslaught of ass-kicking classics like Welcome to Hell and the groundbreaking black metal, the godfathers of the format, Venom didn't have to wait but a fucking year for the proverbial priest to their Sabbath on an appropriately titled obscure Swedish compilation known as the Scandinavian Metal Attack. The Bathory Beast was unfucking leashed. modifying the gutter puck bellowing of Kronos and adding that twist of ring wraith shriek, the newfound Scandinavian sound laid siege to the floundering new wave of British heavy metal, establishing a thunderous new paradigm for unbridled brutality that in many ways is without peer even today. And while Black Mark, a label coincidentally run by a man who would later be revealed to be Quorthon's father, likely believed the standouts would be more commercially inclined fare like the Deep Purple-infused fuckbags from Oz or Scorpion's wannabe trash, the feedback was as profound as it was fucking overwhelming right from the start. Who in Lucifer's chromium-plated cock were these Bathory dudes? Formed in '83 from the ashes of Stockholm hobby bands, the power trio of guitarist-vocalist Thomas Forsberg, aka Quorthon, bassist Frederick, aka Hanoi, and drummer and soon-to-be world-renowned music video and film director Jonas Ackerlund, then known by the unceremonious pseudonym of Vans McBurger, combined an affection for Motorhead, Sabbath, 70s punk, and oi, with, I'm sure, zero influence from a certain English band that had not only invented but titled fucking black metal 1 year previous.
Jag och Fredrik då, Fredrik som var min kusin, vi var jävligt inne på den tyngre liksom delen av hårdrock. Och sen så var det ju en våg där punken ändå låg kvar på något sätt och vi tyckte om punken så vi hade alltid en vision om att spela någon slags snabb Black Sabbath-variant. Då skulle vi starta ett band så vi satte upp en sån här lapp att vi sökte gitarrist och sångare. Och så kom vi i kontakt med Ace då.
The result was heavy metal methamphetamine, unbridled aggression and energy that wore its transparently occult inclinations on its sleeve. Its literal fucking sleeve, emblazoned with a butt-fucking goat's head. Funny, can't imagine where they got that idea. The intent was clear at the outset, to craft the musical embodiment of a satanic siege. But there was far more than motherfucking velocity under the hood here, as in my opinion the strongest refrain can be found in the more down-pace affairs, such as the Sabbathy strains of Raise the Dead and the headbanging proto-thrash of Necromancy. You're welcome, Varg.
Wow. We lie, we cheat, we steal. We lie, we cheat, we steal.
The first Bathory album was a nuclear fucking warhead, wasting man, woman, and child alike in a hellish holocaust of wrought iron pentagrams and blood-caked crosses with a musicality to match. What is it I always say, bitches? Not all freshmen first live up to the top billing. Bathory ain't fucking among them. If you love black metal, fuck if you don't love black metal. If you're a reformed fucking punker lusting for additional aggression, Bathory is the balm to soothe your scorched asshole, my friend. Punk meets Motorhead with a generous slathering of Sabbath and Satanism. Fuck, it's a good goddamn thing absolutely no one, like from England, for example, deigned to fucking think of this before, 1 year previously.
What age you actually decided to make music, and what were your inspirations at this time? Venom or...
I didn't know about, well, as I started to write more and more material, it sounded like a combination between Sex Pistols and Motorhead. And then I realized maybe I should, take some influences or mix some Black Sabbath stuff in there as well. Mm. And if you mix Motorhead and Black Sabbath, you have early Bathory, so...
Oh, sweet Jesus. Fucking rant. Quorthon, love you, bud, but you're more full of shit than a Ganges swim team. Do I believe you were singing serenades to Sabbath? Sure. Do I believe you were inspired by Motorhead? Why the fuck not? Your nickname's Ace, for Christ's sake. Do I buy for a fraction of a fucking second that you knew not one thing about Venom when you fashioned fucking Bathory? Hell Hell the fuck nah! And I'm not alone, as Jonas Åkerlund, today a world-famous director, but at that time your own goddamn ridiculously named drummer, hastened to fucking confirm.
Redan då ganska visuell och hade någon slags vision om vad vi skulle göra. Och vi hade ögonen på Venom och hela den biten. Så att det repet, det var ju ingen snack om att vi skulle ha ett band. Vi tyckte att Bathory var ett jävligt bra namn. Vi tyckte det var ett bra namn. Så jag var hela tiden orolig för att vi snodde namnet från Countess Bathory då, från Venoms första platta. Så snodde vi, det var ju en av deras låttitlar. Det var ju därifrån vi fick det.
Why did you pick the name Bathory?
At first we had a lot of different names. I read a book about, Vlad Tepes, the original Dracula, and Gilda Reyes and everybody, and Elizabeth Bathory was in that book, and I thought I was just fascinated by her life story.
That's some bullshit.
Oh, but why would Quorthon lie? I don't know, you nebulous internet asshats. Why did he lie to the press for 2 fucking decades when asked if Boss was his fucking father?
Men sen blev det då seriöst, och sen droppade ju han senare att hans farsa jobbade inom skivindustrin.
Read that fucking rant on his website sometime. It's a real hoot. For a dude who positioned himself as an atavistic auteur, he sure as shit seemed inordinately preoccupied with his fucking image. And there's not even the beginnings of a scintilla, of an angstrom of an ass fucking thing wrong with that, for the record, provided, unlike Quorthon, you aren't taking the piss out of other bands for behaving in identical fucking fashion. Black metal ain't Nirvana, nutwipes. You have to do more than waddle your diabetes-ravaged dickhole on stage. Spew blood, breathe fire, butt fuck a skunk for all I care, but don't bash black metal for actually possessing a sense of spectacle. Beats the fuck out of the B.O. brigade at the average death metal show, circle banging in camo-clad glee to the same feckless fret vomit for 50 billionth butt fucking times while their feet spot weld to the fucking floor, chief. If all I wanted out of my concert-going experience was growling, blast beats, and butthole stench, I could get 2/3 of that shit in the restroom of an Indian food restaurant. All 3 after a good curry. Point being, image matters, and Bathory possessed a canny grasp of it for the entirety of their existence. It's just a crying-ass shame Quorthon had to lie his nuts off to foist a false narrative about Bathory inventing black metal in a motherfucking vacuum. But say it loud, because Christ knows after 3 goddamn decades of fallacious Bathory created it all and Venom just made up the name nonsense, it's half past time we dismantle this motherfucking idiocy. Venom did it first. Deal the fuck with it. Next.
Have you ever met Kronos and all that?
No, he called me a dickhead, and after that I wasn't too sure whether he was...
He didn't.
He did.
All that happened was, when I was trying out different stage clothes, I took a pair of leather trousers and I cut them so they were shorts. Yeah, so I had short leather trousers on, and then the bullet belt and the wristbands, and then Quorthon did exactly the same.
I can't decide what's more impressive about 1985's follow-up, The Return. That it set the standard for modern black metal, or that it's yet to be surpassed by any of the Bathory faithful fucking since. Everything after this ass-kicking album was a case study in steadily softening the sound. Not necessarily a bad thing given the band's broadening influences, not to mention the superb fucking albums to come, but there's a reason everyone from Euronymous to Fenriz to Abath asserts that not Blood, Fire, Death, not Under the Sign, not even the self-titled, but The Return represents the zenith for both Bathory and black metal. And while the bellyache and belugas pitch a pissant fit about the production, as I've pointed out in the past, The Return is in fact the only Bathory album to be recorded in an honest-to-goddamn studio, meaning the lo-fi fuckery afoot here is eminently intentional. After a minute of malevolent industrial feedback fuzz, the guitars roar to life like a rusty chainsaw, and you're throttled by the merciless strains of the aptly titled Total Destruction. The drums here don't so much pound as they fucking pulsate beneath the mix, booming out the black metal like a battleship boiler, and there ain't enough superlatives in the English language to convey the kick-assery of Quorthon's Crocify, and, in my opinion, a vocal performance he never fucking equaled. And while I love vinyl and own the entire discography on it, in retrospect, I think it was a boon that my first exposure to this record came on compact disc instead, because after throwing it on my car stereo and enduring a minute and a half of ambient atmospheric bullshit, my patience was at last exhausted, and I hit the skip button, only to be bowled the fuck over by this beast. And to the armchair aspies that allege that not only is Venom, quote, not musically black metal, but go one step further in saying Bathory's The Return is, quote, the first black metal album ever made.
Venom is not black metal. This is factually the first black metal album.
Gonna have a trying-ass time hand-waving this one away, teacup. Metal Archives, that's gotta sting! While the title track was written as early as Scandinavian Metal Attack, the song, like the genre it belongs to, wasn't perfected until the release of this ass fucking album right here. And it's precisely while being harrowed by the aforementioned nefarious fucking croak that you may find it interesting to note that prior to the first recordings, the band, rightly reasoning that to have a hope of scoring a record deal or getting a goddamn gig would require a slightly softer sound, actually tried to replace Quorthon as the sole vocalist, to which Quorthon knowingly acceded, whereupon he handed said nameless knob the lyrics, jollied him into a recording chamber festooned with fucking pentagrams and puddles of pig's blood, no shit, and said, alright, Slick, go ahead and try and record this. One woeful performance later, which Quorthon later described as, quote, Ronnie James Dio with a sex change, the prick jimmied his ass out the back door without so much as a bone swab, buy your leave, or blow me. But it's a good thing they didn't, as with the preceding album, there ain't a bad song in the bunch, with everything from the groove thrash of Born for Burning to the epic doomcraft of the Rite of Darkness presaging the black metal mastery to come. If it lacked just one thing, it was that extra coat of production polish, albeit an intentional one. And when the calendar revolved anew, that's precisely what we goddamn got.
With The Return, it was like, it was much, you know, I took too much responsibility on my shoulders. You know, it was like, I was influenced by different things, and it was probably, the reason why the album turned out a little bit different and wicked was because we were totally drunk during the recording, and we were totally into the dark side of life. And the third album shows a new side of us, where we try new things like keyboards, and I sing a little bit different, and I even do leads in every song, I think.
Unholy flying fuckballs, what a black metal monolith! From the sonic mortar barrage of Massacre to the ass-rending of Doom, under the sign of the Black Mark sets up shop in your lower intestine, and it ain't coming up for air till the needle snaps off. But what characterizes the cacophony in question is less the whiplash black metal of, say, Chariots of Fire, but the next logical progression from the epic return track Rite of Darkness, thunderous, satanic screeds like Call from the Grave, and the ageless epic Enter the Eternal Fire. Fuck, even the immortal Equimanthorn, covered exceptionally some years later by Dark Funeral, might I add, makes its deepest cuts once it plunges into that infectious groove metal midsection. While the album that followed, and even a fair few long after that, would boast the occasional allusion to Bathory's black metal antecedents, for all intents and purposes, this was the last pure black metal release of the band's career, rounding out an untouchable trilogy even Quorthon himself was hard-pressed to equal. Many argue, fucking credibly, might I add, that he never goddamn did. For the longest time, I outright avoided the fuckery to follow, and while I've since come to appreciate the latter-day output, I'd be lying if I said they come within miles of this masterful triumvirate. While I sincerely believe the quality of this release in particular is massively overestimated, largely by reformed fuckwads from the other fucking genres who piss their striper underoos at the thought of the Return's harder-edged production, Under the Sign is still savage regardless. Boil a baby alive if you have to, but fucking get it! Yet as the old guard fell, yet another era began. Witness the birth of what would come to be known as Viking metal.
And it's a fine day to die, regardless if you're going to win or lose or die or whatever. It's a fine day to die.
Are you a bearded Viking swilling meat in an upturned fucking longboat who despises the living shit out of pure black metal? Listen to Blood, Fire, Death. Are you an elitist black metal bobsledder living in the mountains of Blashurk, jacking off with fucking wampa spit? Fuck it! Listen to Blood, Fire, Death. If Hammerheart is the album that divides the Bathory fanbase, Blood, Fire, Death is the one that unites it. The sonic rainbow bridge to black metal Valhalla, decimating the DMZ betwixt satanic shrieks and bellowing bearded Norsemen. This album is Bathory's British steel, their ace of spades. In short, if you've yet to imbibe in the Bathory brew, this is the record to start with. Melodic aggression lathered in lyricism, depicting ancient Nordic battles, cohabitating with straight-ahead thrashers, might I add, and all of the above, tinged with the malevolent shrieks of unbridled black metal. What strikes me about this album, and many more to come, however, is what a profoundly under-fucking-rated guitarist Quorthon actually is. Oh, I hear constantly about what a master of melody he was, how he managed to imbue the aggression of the extreme underground with the likes of fucking folk rock, and all these are to his immortal credit, might I add. Christ knows Varg should be paying him fucking royalties. His career followed an identical goddamn trajectory. I wonder if that's a coincidence. But when the climactic chords of perma-classic A Fine Day to Die ring out, and he launches into a euphony of soaring shredcraft, it's utterly impossible not to be struck by how unjustifiably ignored his actual guitar playing was.
Och Ace var ju, han var ju en genial gitarrist. Han var ju vi hade aldrig spelat med någon som var så duktig som honom. Så då blev ju vi förstås bättre och...
But like many a masterpiece, it was the product of internal upheaval, with Octagon jollying off to smack his bitch up with Prodigy. Actually, I think he left before the first album. In fact, Quorthon wound up putting feelers the fuck forth and inquired if a young Danish drummer, Carsten Nielsen, would be interested in brandishing the Bathory banner. No, he replied, I reckon my current band will be 50 times the fucking size of yours. The name of that band? Artillery. But the New Avengers did eventually assemble, necessitating a pair of new names, returning, no pun intended, to the same list of demons that gave him his own Quorthon eponym in '84. It was thus that the two hired guns, who literally didn't want to play extreme metal of any description, by the way, and who in classic Bathory fashion have yet to be named to goddamn date, might I add, became Vornth and Kothar. You tell me.
Well, there is a meaning, of course, since we were heavily involved with, the black arts and stuff like that, and the dark side of life, not necessarily always the evil side of life. We picked the names from, there was a capture in what was called the Black Bible. I don't know if there ever was something like an official Black Bible or whatever, but Quorthon is one of Satan's 7 sons.
Oh, yeah.
And Quorthon is the word of the Nazarene on the Day of Judgment, we decided that maybe we should, pick some names, to put on posters and stuff.
Yeah.
Because Swedish people would not be able to pronounce the names,
Yeah.
because we have the TH sound, the Korthan, and phonetically it was very close to Bathory as well. It was just a joke, more or less, because everybody have, stage names, like, Gene Simmons or Lemmy or Kronos or, Ozzy Osbourne and stuff like that. So we figured, why not pick some names that nobody could pronounce?
With a stable lineup at last, not to mention a fevered groundswell for his wildly innovative music worldwide, the pressure began to boil. When would Bathory tour? Oh, mind you, there were reputedly some one-off dates in the early going, backyard barbecues, birthdays, and bullshit, but always local, only in the nascent stages of the band, and most shockingly of all, no photos or video of any description to confirm their fucking existence.
Your lack of touring, is this a personal choice from you?
Yeah.
It is. Would you feel comfortable on a live stage?
I would have been 16 or 17 or 18, being closer to 31 than 16. The last time was in January 1985, like I said, and that's 11 years ago.
What I have to do to get you on tour, on the road?
That will be virtually impossible. You're going to have to kick me out of the band before that will happen, because I don't get the kicks out of doing that.
Most puzzlingly of all, Korthan seemed to proffer a different response for every time he was asked, from logistics to economics to lack of a lineup. But allow me to fuel further speculation here, because between Korthan's untimely death before he hit 40 years old, from a rare heart defect he was later acknowledged to have suffered from in the past, to his inconsistent answers on the subject, my read on this subject has always been that Korthan didn't tour because Korthan was probably physically unable to tour. Take it for what it is, admitted speculation, albeit informed by circumstantial evidence, and by all means, if anyone watching this has countervailing evidence of any kind, do please share. But I've long suspected there was more to the story, and I'd be surprised if I've overshot the mark here. Contributing to the upheaval were clashing creative directions within the band. While Bloodfire Death itself was being born, Korthan was already contemplating a more melodic, purely conceptual affair, the earliest recordings of which actually date back to this era. In actuality, the follow-up was originally envisioned as a rare double album affair.
So once we had actually scrapped the idea of releasing this concept album, Blood and Ice, we tossed with the idea, why don't we put out a double album? Because at the time we were sitting there with 25 tracks, 30 tracks all of a sudden. It was a pretty big risk, for a band like Bathory to release a concept album.
Understand.
I mean, it could have turned out to be the Elder Part 2,
One side, a bloody barbarian epic, later released as Blood on Ice, and the other half, a black metal massacre, more in line with The Return, entitled Requiem, not of course to be confused with a later record that would bear the very same eponym. That half, sadly, remains unreleased, although a couple killer tracks from those sessions did materialize on the Jubileum releases in the form of Crawl to Your Cross and the bitchin' Burnin' Leather. But more on that beast later. Bloodfire Death is a true trailblazer of the metal form, a profound fucking statement that broadened the borders of black metal thereafter, giving license to thousands of bands to forsake the arcane climbs of mere Satanism for longboats, battle axes, and fucking folklore. An unqualified recommendation. Next.
With the two new guys, it feels like this is the guys that I've been looking for all the time. In Sweden it's a little bit difficult, but it's getting better. As heavy metal or whatever, heavy metal is getting big coverage in Sweden.
But the other guys in the band were fed up with Saxon and Iron Maiden, and I had a quite difficult time persuading them to actually go faster and to actually sing about this satanic thing. And we did that for 3 records, and then I realized that in my lyrics I was more or less critical to this whole religious stuff than I thought I was. And I realized Sweden had a very interesting mythology in itself, the Viking thing.
emboldened by his fleeting foray into the realm of Nordic symbology and Viking longboats and faced with fuckbags of Bathory imitators, Quorthon, being Quorthon, immediately began to fumble for further ways to remain perpetually ahead of the cool curve. I mean, let's call a spade here. Quorthon? Bit of a black metal hipster. It seems every ass fucking time he yielded anything that achieved even an angstrom of public acceptance, he'd zigzag right the fuck out of relevance. Hell, this is a dude who once went on a promotional tour of the United States and instructed his traveling partners at the outset to tell absolutely no one who he was.
I went there with a couple of people and I told them, don't tell anybody I'm here because I want to be able to go walk around and just be anybody. And especially as people shouldn't be able to recognize me, in person from pictures that's been released before.
Way to defeat the purpose of a promotional tour. If Hammerheart seems disjointed here, and sorry folks, I firmly believe it fucking is, it's because it was a last-minute haphazard affair fired the fuck out when the preceding effort, a full-blown Viking metal fantasy record, failed to materialize. Quorthon was moving fast, but this was the first time he felt he'd moved too fast, and so the material was locked away in the same closet Joe Lynn Turner's been hiding in the last 40 fucking years, and a concerted effort was made to simplify the self-same approach. But it's a decidedly mixed bag. Look, people love this record, so I won't be changing any minds here, but to me, Hammerheart suffers immeasurably from Quorthon's compulsory self-sabotage. Following up a ponderous 10-minute track with a twin 10-minute titty fucking track? This ain't an album, it's a fucking life choice, and that's just the opening, folks. From the lyrical pretense to the shreddy solos that were welcome on Bloodfire Death, but by Hammerheart were coming perilously close to world-class wankfest, to the shameless Enter the Eternal Fire shuffle drum dogshit he beats, the fucking the ground, the fucking the ground, the fucking the fucking the fucking the ground. Hammerheart and the veritable ocean of unctuous imitators it spawned is progressive metal in the worst possible sense. Like, if 70s Genesis wrote the music and 80s Genesis wrote the lyrics. Worse still, as a Satru Santa Claus's undying adoration for this album clearly demonstrates, it ushered in an interminable era of ponderous, skull-splittingly boring 90s-ass Norway worship records that only recently, thankfully, fucking ceased. Can you imagine if any other culture on Earth was as obsessed with its antecedents as Scandinavia goddamn is? HurDurr, but Viking mythology is so metal. Just look at all the blood and the bones. Yeah, Spain has a history of conquest, war, and technological advancement too, you tit. You don't see Mexico making mariachi metal. Of course, if I had to live in a country that in the present is basically that shitty plastic village they put in the goddamn snow globes every year, I suppose I'd have my eyes firmly fucking affixed to the rearview mirror myself. Hammerheart's not a complete loss, folks. Not only was it arguably the commercial peak, spawning the lone music video of the band's career, but like any Bathory release, it features more than a few badass asides, and in retrospect, many of the thrashier refrains presage the thrash metal experimentation to come. Look, this may be my least favorite Bathory record, but by God, it's still Bathory. Meaning even in its most listless, languid, down-paced, decades-long intro track-laden moments, it's still full-on fucking listenable, as in the epic ode to Ace's Swedish motherland. Stay tuned for the 2018 update, Land of Twice Raped. Look, I hated this record and all who emulated it when I was younger. As an adult, yeah, fuck you, it still blows bison dick. But it's a bovine BJ I've grown incrementally more fond of with the passage of time.
We are trying to come up with a personal musical identity and get away from everything what people thought of us before. People just tend to have these preconceived notions about you when you, for 7 years, has been playing rather speed-oriented metal, and once you've changed, it's not a change overnight, it's a change that has been going on for 2 years.
Having all but invented the Viking metal genre all by his lonesome, one might think, well, fuck Quorthon, keep rolling them bones. Maybe he'll accidentally invent EDM, dubstep, or A convenient method of hanging yourself for inventing all of the above. Point being, where most hipster halfwits would continue trailblazing, leaving the Frankensteinian abomination to fend for its fucking self, Quorthon was no Dr. Frankenstein. Having invented Viking metal, it was now time to nurture it, to ensure it doesn't vitiate its own potential, hemmed in by Hammerheart's meat-swilling suckitude. And so came the album, I Hold the Fuck Aloft. Proof positive that Quorthon was no flash-in-the-pan preemie more enthralled by the act of creation than exploring the merits of said creation once spawned. Whereas Hammerheart has admittedly never worked for me, Twilight of the Gods, once I shed my initial aversion to the Viking subgenre it spawned from, is Twilight of the Godlike. Whether it's the titanic triumvirate of the title track, Through Blood by Thunder, or Blood and Iron, this album's titles are bloodier than Jill Janus's sloppy, fake, nasty tits. But the real standout for yours truly is the arcane anthem, Under the Runes. And here again, the Venom comparisons leap to the fore, as Bathory, like the Newcastle black metal maestros in question, opted to make a 30-minute epic encompassing one entire side of the vinyl release of the album. But whereas Venom's At War with Satan is really just 3 or 4 kick-ass metal tunes spot-welded together ass to elbow, the Twilight opening triad is a savage symphony, one track twisting effortlessly into the next, remaining musically and thematically succinct throughout. If I have one gripe, it's the doom-laden lethargy of Bond of Blood, a transparent salute to Sabbath, might I add. Really doesn't work as well as in Nomine Satanas, which was presumably cut from the Bloodfire Death Sessions for being woefully deficient in hipster beards and honeymead. Moreover, it exposes the blinding Bathory hypocrisy outright, namely that while in later years Quorthon would falsely allege that he transitioned from black metal to Viking because it was, quote, too derivative, derisively labeling his first 4 albums the era where I was Satan's bitch, yet evidently the songs from that era weren't too derivative to clone whole fucking cloth and alter lyrically until it's about bearded fat asses fucking oops! But shear the Credo Joe Cool cock shit away, and what you wind up with here is experimentation every bit as profound as it was pioneering, a bold attempt to broaden the boundaries of the nascent niche he just 1 album ago carved out for himself. Twilight of the Gods is more a grower than a shower, at least for fans of Bathory's black metal quadrilogy like myself, but if you work the wank shaft and cup the balls, prepare for a raging heavy metal hard-on. Penis! Next!
Twilight was a very introverted, depressive record. And it was very, very different. And myself personally, halfway through the recording, I figured this is it, because I didn't have any more ideas, and I realized I would paint myself into a corner.
Yeah.
Never be able to produce a 365 beats per minute type of thrash or death shit after that.
Going from Twilight of the Gods to where? You would either have to take it one step further, and then perhaps people wouldn't be able to understand it.
And judging by the reviews online, in print, and elsewhere, understand it? We resoundingly fucking didn't, having burrowed about as deep as any human being conceivably needs to into the mead-stained depths of Norse mythology. Quorthon, in his persistent quest to remain perpetually one step ahead of the cool curve, had a pause and a poop and contemplated his next move.
50% of the Bathory fan mob sort of like enjoys the more aggressive black metal or death metal side of Bathory, and we have another 50% into the slow and heavy arranged type of Nordic metal, or whatever you want to call it. So those two types of music are not very nice to combine on a record because they sort of like contradict one another. So one has to find
Bathory'd been fast, raw, and unabashedly satanic in the early going before gradually transitioning to a thundering epic quality that characterized the entirety of their latter-day output, but where was the technical precision in either? From Bathory's very inception, the band had been sonically defined by the lo-fi fuck-off stylings of what could best be described as proto-crust punk. But by the 90s, a new subgenre, of course, had reared its Bermuda shorts-bedecked bitch tits, and its name was thrash metal, a genre, ironically, which owed its very existence to bands like Bathory and Venom, taking one hard, withering glance at his German thrash metal brethren in Sodom, who several years previously had successfully traversed the tightrope from the clangorous climbs of first-wave black metal to tech thrash demigods and said, "Bitch, I'm Quorthon, I can do that shit too." Killer guitar tone, not half bad songs, but to comprehend the about face, you first have to slap on your khaki cargo pants and journey back to the year 1994 with me. Shouldn't be too hard for you since our culture's yet to progress one fucking iota ever since. After Twilight of the Gods, Quorthon began to withdraw from the metal scene at large. His hired gun band, long since dissolved and reduced to a studio concern, he gradually became more and more concerned with the reaction his band had elicited from the public. Bitches banging their brains out on burial mounds with crucifixes jammed in their slatch traps, mailing him the dirt they did it on. Convicted killers claiming the lyrics to The Return inspired their rash of serial murders. It may not seem like much today, what with the coastal rap feuds of the 90s, Tupac and Biggie, not to mention Norwegian black metal in its entirety, but really place yourself back in that time period. This was pre-Burzum. Pre-Mayhem, in fact. I mean, pre-church burnings, pre-Faust knife fucking a dude who wanted to slip in the Lilyhammer salami. Look, there's no precedent for this shit is my point. The only available analog was Venom, and they were already in freefall by this fucking point. Quorthon, already an introvert, had no emotional compass to process this fucking insanity, and so he withdrew, demanding his record label give him a year off. Their counteroffer was simple. Take a powder instead, and pinch out a solo record. And while it wasn't bad, it also wasn't Bathory. Fortunately, Purity of Essence also patted a few dozen cc's of give a fuck into Quorthon's veins, and he was off to the races with brand new Bathory material. But Quorthon was nothing if not a restless soul, and after the pseudo-epic affectations of Slumberheart and Twilight of the Nods, it was time to reconnect with his kick-ass fucking roots. If by roots you mean sloppy tech street thrash. To Ace's credit, however, he did it in his own inimitable Bathory style. And as you'll soon become cognizant of, where Bathory is concerned, there's no shortage of underrated fucking records. Pistol fuck the haters. Requiem rules, bitch.
We are, after so many years going into the studio using 16 tracks only for backing harmony vocals, you get very bored. And you ask yourself, what the fuck happened to, that punch in your stomach? And, just have great fun, just blast off, go in there, fart, and then get out of there.
The early 90s was a period of extended musical drought for the Q-Man, but you'd hardly but fucking know it from how productive he was at the outset. Cut in a matter of weeks before Requiem was pinched out to the public, it wasn't but 6 weeks before Octagon was unearthed, which given the decuman disparity in production quality is a tough pill to swallow, but hey, that's what Quorthon says, and Quorthon, as we all know, is a veritable font of factual information. Just like when he said he wasn't inspired by Venom, Boss wasn't his father, and his name isn't Thomas Forsberg. In fact, as a complete aside, Quorthon would disperse disparate nomenclature just to fuck with fawning journalists over the years. In one interview, he'd say his name was Peter Forsberg. In another, Mats Sundin. Fuck, on a particularly hilarious occasion, he alleged his Christian name was Runka Snorkroka, a name which, if Google Translate is any more reliable than lion-ass Quorthon, roughly translates to jerk-off snotbird, and the asshats reported it as wrote. Even in Sweden! Often without confirming with Quorthon first. In fact, the fucking black metal Bible, Lords of Chaos, the movie version of which is slated to be directed by former Bathory member Jonas Åkerlund, by the way, once printed Quorthon's God-given name as Pew Rogefelt. A gut-busting goddamn assertion, as Pew Rogefelt is a locally famous folk singer, the Dan fucking Fogelberg of Scandinavia, and co-writer Didrik Söderlund, despite being Norwegian and presumably aware of this fucking fact, printed that shit anyway. Everything around this fucking band was fake news. At this point, I don't believe the name chiseled on his fucking tombstone. Show me a death certificate, goddammit. And speaking of dying a death, there may not be a deader sound ever achieved on a record than the fucking nonsense featured on Octagon. The songs themselves, fun, fast-paced, whiplash thrash with tongue firmly affixed to cheek, evoking the oft-ignored humor of latter-day Bathory with balls of fucking titanium. It's just a shame no one shared any balls with the fucking recording equipment. Fuzzy, feckless, and oh so fucking forgettable. While the tunes are far from trash, it's like listening to a halfway decent album through the shittiest stereo in the Western Hemisphere. If you ever wondered where Lars Ulrich scored the searingly brilliant idea to record his Saint Anger drums at a fucking junkyard, wonder no fucking longer, folks. Is the record a resounding success? Fuck with a side of hell no it ain't, but neither is it a fucking affront. It's just a crying ass shame Quorthon recruited Oscar the Grouch for the goddamn drum solos and recorded it on an underwater answering machine. And before any bleary-eyed ass canyons fire back with, how can you complain about Bathory recording quality? Why, have you heard the first 4 records? Sure I have, sugar tits, but we've shifted genres since then, and recording speed thrash with a busted ass Walkman is like asking ABBA to cut Gimme 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 on a goddamn Victrola. Octagon, fast, furious, fucking unlistenable. Next. If the Rectagon era boasted one beneficial byproduct, it recharged Quorthon's depleted creative batteries. In lieu of ambling epics wanked the fuck out with wall-to-wall mandolins and mead-swilling motherfuckery, he learned he could have just as much fun plugging the fuck in and rocking the fuck out. And while the results were about 50-50 ultimately, Bathory was back, bitch, and the fans couldn't be happier. So when Ace let fly a fleeting mention of the fabled Lost Bathory concept record cut between Bloodfire Death and Hammerheart, fans were on his ass like Spacey on the Vienna Boys Choir.
By the sounds of it, this was originally, I presume, going to be released between Bloodfire Death and Hammerheart, yeah?
Oh, right.
So how comes that never came?
Well, it's a concept album.
And so with renewed energy and focus, he fished the modeled metal record in question out of the shit bin, leaned back, and assessed what was salvageable. And to his surprise, it held up surprisingly goddamn well. Remember, this is the album he believed would be infinitely too jarring for his newfound fan base. By the time Bloodfire Death was released, The Return, remember, was only just beginning to be hailed as a band's standout album, the quote, most evil shit ever recorded, as he, of course, famously opined. He wasn't sure the black metal murder cult in question would appreciate the more symphonic climbs of what was basically a Conan concept album. Well, Conan's writer, anyway. Inspired both by Norse mythology and one of the more obscure Robert E. Howard yarns, The Grey God Passes, Blood on Ice is the most shameless of concept albums. Knowing precisely what it was, and more importantly, knowing I wasn't fucking interested, I avoided Blood on Ice for years. But you know what? I was wrong. This album sorta kinda rips. Whereas I view Hammerheart and Twilight as pretentious poncery, Blood on Ice actually has the skill to fulfill its more epic ambitions. With many of the songs lacking lead vocals of any kind, much of the performance was redubbed in the 90s by a noticeably more competent melodic Quorthon. The result? A kind of Viking metal answer to Blind Guardian. I mean, really, just listen to this shit. But But sorry, Q-Tip, despite your many assertions to the contrary, I do not buy that you weren't inspired by Manowar either.
No evangels of light. Mighty messengers, heathens.
Blood on Ice is far from my preferred Bathory listening, and it's not likely to be near the top of the pile for prospective Bathory binges either, but as a soundtrack for goddamn D&D, just try and beat this shit. But despite a momentary foray into thrash, it seemed latter-day Bathory had become predominantly identified with the Viking metal subgenre, a metal mode that by this point even Quorthon himself was beginning to regard as, and I quote, pretentious. The calls were coming in from all corners, return to the righteous black metal roots. And for the first time in years, Quorthon actually answered. Sorta.
After 2 death metal albums, or whatever you want to call them, Requiem and Octagon, and I realized the epic metal fans of Bathory, because 50% of our record buyers or potential record buyers are into the epic, whereas the other 50% are into the death. So no matter what your album sounds like, you will have half of your fans disappointed.
To the long-suffering disciples of the black metal Bathory era, the darksome Destroyer of Worlds was a breath of fresh air, particularly after enduring the unenthusiastically received Viking metal epic that preceded it, followed by one of the first examples of the band assembling its best-of releases via fan vote during the 3-part Jubileum project. While far from pure pastiche, the first proper release of entirely new material since 1995 was still a transparent attempt to reconnect with the latent aggression and evil of their former repute. I mean, just look at that cover art. Albeit while steering well the fuck clear of invoking Lucifer by fucking name. Musically, it's a bit of a mishmash from galloping epics that evoke the musicality, if not the message, from the Viking epoch. To Octagon-esque turbo thrash, albeit with production you don't need a Navajo codebreaker to fucking decipher. With its slower pace, bellowing bottom end, and unfettered modern metal crunch, the result is sonically not at all dissimilar from what Venom did just 4 years earlier with the comeback that was as underrated as it was ill-timed, Cast in Stone.
I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Destroyer of Worlds may not be pure black metal, but it's a fuck of a lot closer than anything in the preceding decade and a half. A hellish hail Satan after 14 years of Thor fucking, far and a fucking way my favorite of the latter-day output, and an album that, as I recall, stirred uncharacteristic buzz for Bathory at the time of release, but it goes without saying, given the band's sonic progression at that point, that the follow-up would be a long-awaited Viking assault.
When you're picking something like that up from your own history, instead of start to write about spaceships or Margaret Thatcher or unemployment or football, we salute our own history and our own geist all the time whenever we make an album. And if people don't like that, if they would want for Bathory to be hippie, militant, vegetarian lesbians, then okay, not for us.
Straight the fuck up, I did not dig this record or its fucking follow-up upon its initial release. Never one for the Nordic metal nonsense of the late 80s, excepting the masterpiece that is Bloodfire Death, of course. Needless to say, when word dropped of the band's forthcoming output involving multiple motherfucking installments of such, I was beyond flaccid. I was limber as Dulzum in a sauna, freebase, and muscle relaxers, motherfucker, and so I avoided it. Yet as the weeks wore on and the weeks became months, as the biggest fan on this butt-fucking planet, I simply could not reconcile there being brand new Bathory on store shelves and not being in my fucking collection. And so, like Vince McMahon convincing himself 2.0 ratings are a recipe for future relevance, I worked myself into buying the goddamn thing outright. Oh, sure, you're getting it, Razor, but it's just for completionist's sake. You don't actually have to listen to the And almost before I could finish the fucking sentence, I naturally fed the fucking thing into my car stereo. One brief prelude later, Quorthon tore into one titanic track after another, beginning with the eternal epic Nordland itself. How do you make a 9-minute track that tuberculosis fucking catchy? Quorthon, bitch. That's how. I may have nourished a healthy hesitation initially, but every day fucking since, Nordland I has been in my regular rotation in spite of my admitted aversion to horn hats and hipster beards. And yes, I'm aware they didn't wear horn hats. Get ass fucked by an ice giant there, Bjorn. Much like the Blood on Ice era that preceded it, to extract maximum enjoyment from this monolithic but somewhat meandering conceptual colossus, rock some Morrowind, head on over to Solstheim and crank it to fucking 50. You're welcome, bitch. Viking Metal Mastery. Next.
I had one American guy who had been a Bathory fan for 18 years, almost the entire lifespan of Bathory, and he bought Nordland after having not been listening to Bathory for a very long time, and he said, I'm 15 again. And then you realize that there's an atmosphere and a feeling in whatever Bathory is producing, irregardless of the style.
Originally envisioned as a multiple album set, as with all things Bathory, the disinformation train set up from Fuckbag Junction right from the outset, alleging that it was to be a 4-album affair, a fact repeated ad astra by every limberdick longboat aficionado in the metal archives. Contrariwise, however, Quorthon himself was interviewed in late 2003 and stated, quote, he considered the saga essentially finished. His untimely demise, of course, made all the more tragic for fans of his older work by the fact that in 2004, he was already teasing a return to the black metal roots of vintage Bathory.
With Bathory, you can do practically anything. We could make a black metal album next week, and it would still be Bathory, but it would be different kind of black metal than black metal in the early 80s when we used to do that kind of stuff.
But the second part of the saga we'd receive in the interim was no fucking slouch. With deeper valleys than its predecessor, it nevertheless ascends to infinitely higher peaks. Whereas Destroyer of Worlds was a modeled conglomeration of disparate metal, unified solely in sonic theme, and Nordland I took a somewhat apprehensive approach, couching shorter, catchier tunes in the heraldry of Nordic heroism without sauntering too far off the fucking cliff, Nordland II is all the fuck in, parting wide its yawning depths and beckoning the willing listener to park their pulsating prick inside. Well, slide on in, sailor, because if you hang with the lengthier compositions and fountains of flowing honey mead, the rewards are positively ubiquitous. This is the ultimate tabletop RPG soundtrack. A fact, as an avowed fucking nerd himself, I believe Quorthon would have heartily fucking approved of. Unless, of course, Venom did it first, then he'd pretend to fucking hate that shit. Why, it even includes Bathory's first lyrical allusions to America ever immortalized in song. Bathory, like the Motorhead band they'd idolized as adolescents, were the eternal, if influential, underdogs of black metal. Anyone who studied the First World War knows it's the front lines that take all the flack, and Bathory were way the fuck out in front. Too early to usher in the Scandinavian black metal behemoth to come, but too progressive and experimental to reap the rewards by the time it goddamn did, with a record company that was ill-equipped to capitalize regardless. And then, just as it began its commercial ascent in the early to mid-2000s with the Disciples of Quorthon tearing up the Eurotrash charts, like a bolt from the black, he was suddenly gone. Dead of an apparent heart attack at just 38 years of age.
Jag tror att det är timingen och han. Och det tråkigaste är ju att han inte liksom finns kvar och liksom får uppleva den där grejen som håller på att hända med Bathory nu. Att historien håller på att ta ut sin rätt nu. Och han är värd att liksom vara med på det nu. Det är ju synd att han inte är det. Plus att han förstås hade jävligt mycket mer att ge musikaliskt. Det kändes som han var ju outtömlig. Han kunde ju hålla på att hela livet.
Adventures awaits me, I hear my brothers calling. Spring is here, and the ice breaks, clear sky and open sea. I will say, where the raven fly on black wings high and...
We'll never truly know how cognizant Quorthon was of his own impending mortality in the years prior to his passing, but one thing's for fucking sure. If he knew he was biting the big one soon, he sure as shit never let on to the press. And in a profoundly fucking Bathory twist, even his death was ultimately overshadowed by a 2004 tsunami that claimed the life of Nasum's frontman, whose name I'm not even gonna begin trying to say, and of course the demise of Dimebag Darrell. But good luck naming a loss in all of metal more singularly excruciating than that of Quorthon, made ever more heartbreaking by the irrefutable fact that he had shitloads more music to make and just never got to. And thus this, his final work, functions as a kind of musical epitaph. But Christ in a fucksling, what a send-off, as in the appropriately titled The Death and Resurrection of a Northern Sun. With the passing of the man who was later quietly confirmed to be his father, known to us all as Boss, in one of the most underreported stories of all last year, it seems the Bathory legacy is at last stilled. Stilled, but never stagnant.
Thomas Forsberg dog 38 år gammal och det blir såklart speciellt för hans pappa att se och höra när Watain hyllar sonens verk.
Tack för all support under alla år.
De har hittat alla grejerna i låtarna och touchen i det och känslan i det, va. Och det är klart, original är alltid original, va. Det är ju så, va. Men jag tycker de gör det väldigt bra, alltså. När introt kom, då blev jag rörd, alltså. Då kändes det, men då tänkte jag, nej, nu får du skärpa dig, Börje. Gå in och kör här. Så att, men jag kände glädje. Samtidigt att du förstår det, va. Det är ju roligare att se Ace K som står här. Men det här är minst lika bra.
Bathory's is a legacy that looms eternal. The greatest goddamn black metal band to ever roam this fucking earth. And once more for posterity, my favorite band, full stop. Until we emerge once more from the mists of the metal mythos, Rageaholics, I'm Razor Fist. God fucking speed.